From Deer Park Monastery, it's Meet the Monastics. I'm Brother Min An.
Now you get to choose, and it's deliberate. That is a monk. I choose to be in this intimate way with the community, with this path. I choose not to be in a romantic relationship, but I choose to have real relationship with my people I come across with. So anyway, it's like always a constant choice.
Each week on our program, I talk to a different monk or nun about their journey to monastic life and what inspires them now. Today, my interview with Brother Phap Dung, also known as Brother Embrace. To the children, he likes to go by Popcorn, or sometimes Fabio. Brother Phap Dung was ordained in 1998 in Plum Village, France, at the age of 29, after working for 4 years as an architect in Los Angeles. He helped the Sangha find the land that Deer Park now inhabits, and he served as Deer Park's abbot from 2001 to 2010 before returning to Plum Village, France. He's been living at Deer Park again since 2020 and has been instrumental in the training of new monks, as well as helping us build our new residence. The first time I met him was at Deer Park in 2017, before I was ordained, sitting outside Thay Stupa, which is a pagoda-like structure that juts out of the mountain and overlooks the whole valley. He was burning sage and drinking tea, watching the sunset. He had his brown hoodie pulled over his head, and so I have to say that the Jedi vibes were quite strong. We sat for a few minutes in silence before he started asking me questions about my aspirations. Anyway, he was born in Da Nang, Vietnam, and came as a refugee to the U.S. with his family when he was 9 years old, eventually settling in the San Fernando Valley just north of Los Angeles. Though he grew up in a culturally Buddhist family, he wasn't interested in religion or spirituality until after he graduated from USC School of Architecture. His father was Chinese, and having attended Chinese elementary school as a boy in Vietnam, he didn't speak Vietnamese or have much connection to its culture. But in Los Angeles, as he neared college graduation, he received a grant to travel to Vietnam to study. Here's the interview.
Because, I was going to Vietnam and I didn't know any Vietnamese people. I didn't speak Vietnamese. So my mom actually said, there's a monk here and there's a Vietnamese retreat. Why don't you go to that before you go to Vietnam? So that was my very first time going to a retreat with Thay, because I wanted to meet Vietnamese people. My mom was very grateful for her, Yeah, of course, but back then I was just not interested in, Buddhism, but just interested in meeting Vietnamese people.
How old were you at the time that you saw Thay for the first time?
I guess that's like 26 or something, probably, right after college. Okay. Because that's like 25, whatever right after college is, 18, 19, 20,
22.
22, 23. Yeah, 5 years I spent in college.
So about 23?
Yeah, so 23.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
And so you just went solely just to meet Vietnamese people?
Yeah, because I was like, man, I'm going to Vietnam. I didn't know I was going to win that scholarship. I was just winging it, But they said, yeah, give us the, the budget and you're off.
And had the thought of monastic life entered your mind at that point?
No.
Wow. So you saw Thay. And what was that like?
I was just curious about, wow, he's like this monk. I remember asking him, like, how come monks why can they eat chili? How can they eat chili? So that tells you that, I'm just interested. Yeah, I was just interested in the curiosity. I was just curious.
Like chili, like how do they
chili.
Eat spicy food?
Yeah, and they
like
sweat,
how do they handle
because
it?
It's like, my image is like they get disturbed by it. Because it makes them all hot. And for me, it doesn't seem very peaceful. But I remember asking Thay, and I don't forget what he answered. I also asked him, it's like, why do monks burn themselves? You see? So that tells you where I was at in terms of, because, I didn't know much. And so those are the two questions I got to ask the Zen master when I had a chance. But that retreat, I think I cried once. Yeah, I think definitely the second retreat I cried a lot. But that one, I think that really changed me because I came back and I started meditating. And
so the second retreat happened before you went to Vietnam, or the second retreat after you came back?
Yeah, after I came back from Vietnam, I was working, and then I heard Thay is back, and he has a lot of monks and nuns, and that's when I met the young monks and nuns.
This was in the LA area?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up in the mountain, there was a camp, like a American camp, called Camp Silly. I think it might even be Christian, because I remember the hall had some emblems of Christian things. Yeah, and that was the first time.
So the second retreat, was that still because you wanted to like kind of get to know Vietnamese culture, or were you becoming more interested in the practice?
In the practice, yeah. And then I was curious, more curious. So that one, and I saw monks and nuns were young. They have college degree. So that one was impactful. 1997.
Mm-hmm.
That was my second retreat. And Thay, I found out after that that was a very special trip for him, because first time instead of bringing just 4 or 5 monks with him, which was the first one that I went to, there wasn't many. This time he brought 30 monks and nuns. 15 nuns and 15 monks. So can you imagine? That's quite impactful for me.
Yeah, sure.
Seeing all these young monks and nuns, like, oh my God, they like grew up in Stockton. They grew up in in the U.S. and they became monks. I was like, man. So that was like the kind of seed in looking at monastic. What are they like? What are they about?
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of skeptical about it too. I was like, man, there's got to be some weird things behind this.
It can be pretty challenging to like see someone your age doing something like that when you're not doing anything similar,
Yeah. It was very challenging for me. I was like, man, why would they do that? And then, but the other side of me is like quite suspicious. And it's like, man, are they really like that? Are they happy all the time? They always smiling? They look so happy. I remember seeing the 2 nuns. I think it was Sister Thay and Din, like they were up there chanting, but they're like poking at each other. And I can see between the robes that they're like, joking around. I'm like, man, just. I mean, being serene is great, but it's also being, mischievous, or I would say having fun too.
Yeah.
Up on stage, and I was like, man, how is that possible? And that these little things make me very curious.
It humanizes them, and it makes you feel like, oh, this is not like my idea about what it means to be a monk or a nun. And that's really important, I feel like, for people, who've never been to the monastery or spent time around monks and nuns, because there's a really strong idea of what a monk or a nun is. Yeah. And when they see, like people joking around like that, right. Or, or admitting they're struggling with something too, that's also like, wow, like it's a big wake-up call.
Yeah, it's like, wow, they're like me.
Right.
When I saw, like, when I found out a lot of them had, like, they went to college and they had, like, degrees in biology and stuff, I was like, man, how is that possible?
Mm.
So it put me in a lot of question about, like, wow, my degree and, like, would I let all that go? Because we're so built on, like, that route, college degree, the job, and so it made me really like, wow, how could they let that go? And that's scary, So that was a curiosity that was like bugging me. It's kind of like the modern koan, And Sư Cô Trần Kong found out I was like curious and so on. She said, you don't want to follow along the monastic, I buy a ticket for you. So she bought me a ticket to travel around with them for 3 months. So that second retreat, I had permission for the first retreat, but then by the time I got back, I was like, man, I'm going to follow them to Santa Barbara. So I went to Vietnamese retreat in the Southern California, and then Thay was going up there for Santa Barbara for English-speaking retreat. And so I called in my office and said, I think I'll need another week. So I didn't go back to work. I remember taking my laundry out of the laundry, the washing machine, and just folding it and putting back my backpack, and then I was off again for another retreat. I didn't go to work, And and that was my first time seeing Thay speak English in the retreat. I think there were like 5 days only back then. And we did walking meditation on the beach and seeing dolphins. And that retreat right there was a breakthrough for me. Because then Thay spoke in English and it really entered me. It really, affected me. And so I think that was another breaking point, to see and hear Thay consistently share in English. And then I followed him up to north, to Berkeley and, San Francisco, and then over to Omega in New York, and down to Key West, Florida.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
You were traveling with the Sangha, all over the country.
Oh, yeah, I was living with them.
Wow.
I was like special. We had another Phap Dung and a few other young people, but they didn't go all like me. Phap Lak was in the West Coast following the Sangha too.
Uh-huh.
He and I would drive from northern California down to San Diego with all the monks and nuns stuff, because we had our cars and they couldn't fit everything in their vans. So we helped them. At least I remember filling my car up with their stuff. So the tradition is still alive.
Yeah.
Sangha, how much stuff you guys have? So I drove them down, and I remember helping them packing, and this is a moment for me and Thay. I turned the corner and I met Thay, because we're all leaving, and Thay was leaving too, and we're packing, and then I bumped into Thay, and Thay said, Gong, why don't you join the Buddha's enterprise? I've shared this before, but it's what Zen masters do, They bother you.
This is right after you bumped into him, he said this.
Yeah, he asked me, and he said, why don't you... he said, where are you going or something? And I said, I think I'm going to follow the Sangha. And then Thay said, why don't you join the Buddhist enterprise? Just said enterprise. And I'm like, why is it enterprise? When you hear enterprise, you think of like, business.
Oh.
Yeah. I think of like, businesses, and the Buddha's business. And so that really bothered me. Yeah, that really I was like, what is he talking about? But I remember just waking up and thinking about it. So I realize now that's like what Zen masters do, They plant stuff into your head. They put it, and at that moment you're just bothered by it. It's a word. It's nothing. And for me it just means business. And then later on, after 10 year or 11 year or whatever, I managed to ask Thay, do you remember when I was a lay person in Santa Barbara? No, I think it was Santa Barbara. Yeah, that's right. And then you asked me to join the Buddhist enterprise. And then Thay looks at me and he said, enterprise, that's a very good word, Gong. And then that's it. And I went and looked it up, and I was like, wow. It also means journey of exploration. Yeah, Star Trek. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, okay. So just, Anyway, I remember that really affected me. In Santa Barbara, I had some spiritual moment. Yeah, with the storm and the lightning, and all the stuff that's a little fantastical if I share it with you. But it's very private, because it's like, that's when I realized, like, there's signs. And I was like, man, this is weird. All these coincidences started happening, like crazy coincidence. And so I began to notice things. And that's why I believe now, like, you know, when you're on a spiritual path, you know, there's signs that come up. And you pay attention to them, they show you something. It's a little magical. So I like to keep that. So there's a part of me deep down inside that believes in magic. You know, if I tell you, it's kind of ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense, you know, or like it, yeah, anyway. So I appreciate myself opening up to that kind of world. Yeah, and so now I tell people when they're on the spiritual, I can tell now when people are on the spiritual journey, when they tell me something that they can't believe. And I say, just pay attention. That was your first sign. So it's not whether, you know, don't make anything out of it. But whatever you believe happened, it happened for you. So I don't need to explain to them anything. They want to know for me to explain what it means and stuff. I know. It doesn't matter. It's like it means something to you, and it will mean more and more as you go further down. You know, so pay attention. And so they totally get it. I didn't tell anybody back then, but yeah, things happen, and when you're on the spiritual path, it's things that don't make sense is the best. I remember thinking, I think in my notebook, you can probably look back if it's still around somewhere. And I remember writing stuff like that. It's like, if it doesn't make sense, it's good for you. Go there. Because it's actually half scary. So when you're on the spiritual path, there are things that challenge what you think is normal. So it's one is revealing and is very joyful because it reveals something to you that's magical. Two, it's scary because it's like dark, it's black, and it's like no rug under you, and it's very unstable. So in a way, now that I look back, it's like it's insecure. It doesn't have all that security that you're used to. That's scary, man. It's like really scary. Because all your training, all your growing up, all your family, lectures and what you're supposed to do and succeed in the world is challenged. So it's both liberating, joyful, and very it's amazing, And then it's also very, scary. I remember God, waking up in the middle of the night, just what the hell am I doing, man? This is crazy. But then you would cry the next day because you're so happy. It's just so emotional. I remember feeling tired because just the emotional roller coaster. Having first found something that I was following. So I kept calling my boss and said, it's going to take a while. If I don't do this, then I would regret it for the rest of my life. But luckily, my two bosses were ex-hippie. They're like yuppies, you call them. And many years after I became a monk, I came back and visited him. He cried, He saw me as a monk. He's like, God, man, that's exactly what I would have done. But I got successful. I became a CEO. I remember him telling me that. I was like, no, it's not too late for you. You can still do it. I was like, no. I like to share with people that my breakthrough in learning meditation and curiosity, my first doorway was realizing that I don't have to be angry. It's my choice. I told this story many times about my having a thought about my dad, and just hearing his voice made me angry. But because I'd already committed to sitting and until the incense, is completely burned, I couldn't move from that spot and run or do anything. So I sat there with that thought. Kind of these stories that you have about your dad. And I watched that. And it slowly diminish. And I saw that, God, man, why do I do that to myself? Why do I do that to my dad? So I saw the violence in the thinking. That was like the first time you see it objectively from afar. Your thinking process. Wow, it was amazing. That's a kind of liberation. I mean, it makes sense now, but as a young man then, you just so used to thinking, and you think it's real just because you think it. I don't know if you know what I mean, but in reflection, it's like, yeah, and many people are like that. They just don't know what it is to not think,
right,
or to see their thought and not have to act on it. You know what I mean? It's that kind of distance from it. So that's something I see so valuable that I learn. That I mean, if I have a chance, I always share it with young people. Because people just don't know what it's like to not think, just to take a break. And so I felt such relief to have to not just be okay with, I don't know if I was okay with the breathing, but I was just okay, like I didn't have to do anything about it. I had to express it, and then it just diminished. And so that kind of little bit of a happiness, now that we reflect on it, it's the spiritual happiness, as they say. But that back then, that moment for me was huge. And that's man, I gotta look into this more. Again, my architecture training. I was like, what is going on here?
Solve the problem.
Figure it out. How does this thing work? And so that made me go. And same thing with the monks and nuns. Are they really always happy?
Mm-hmm.
Are they smiling, or is it what's really behind the retreats? What are they really like? So again, trying to figure out all the conditions and the factors. And the more I learn about it, the more. Well, actually, Thay Phap Nim, one of the elder brother, and Phap Dung, they just became really close to me. I mean, he held my hand. I remember walking meditation. I was like, whoa. And I just felt really, this kindness. I remember Thay Phap Nim held my hand when we did walking meditation. That's moved me so much. It's just people don't hold hands, but it was so nice to just hold hand and feel like we're like boys and walking in the beach. So it's a lot of healing, I think, as a young man. Quite defensive, and you have all these ideas about things. So that retreat, I was able to lay to rest a lot of the stories and the stuff. So that really made me really look at a lot of what was my life before and the stories I hold on to. And so that more and more I was recognized that, and more I became a nicer person. I remember thinking, it was I'm actually, more pleasant with myself and with other people, And I remember recognizing that, God, man, it's I don't have to talk over people. I don't have to be the one, I remember noble silence. I was oh my God. I remember first discovering noble silence or touching the earth. These quiet moments where there's no thinking, but just God, a break. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, those things was my door into, I don't know, it's called meditation, but it's just another way of being in the world. So that was my, I was like, wow, this is other way of being in the world. Wow, I didn't know that. So not just community, but like, you know, as a living animal, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to run around and go to ATMs and go shopping, go to the mall, drive, and have your calendar busy. You know, this mode that I was like, that was my life. And I thought that was like, that's what you do, right? When you live in the city, you know? You go to a party, you spend money, you do your stuff. And I was like, wow. I remember coming back. Which retreat was it? It was in between the retreat and staying. Yeah, it was after the retreat, or I forget, there was a delay, and I came home and I was in the backyard just like writing in my notebook and just sitting there and enjoying the backyard, not going anywhere. I was at my parents' place, and it was just like, I didn't feel like I need to be busy. I remember writing a lot of notes in my notebook. I mean, reading Thay's books as well. Like, what was that one on the Diamond Sutra? Yeah, that's like reading these small little books. I don't remember what they're about now, but they affected me back then. So I spent a lot more time looking into things about Thay and what he was writing. Oh, and I read Old Path, White Cloud, which was, I realized it's quite dangerous to read.
Why?
Because it, you know, it just makes you a different person. You may be a different person. You know, you know, people don't want to be changed, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, man, I can't be like mean in the world anymore.
That's what's so scary about this time in a monastic's life, is because it's like, you realize, like, you keep going down this path, you're going to cross a point where, like, there's no turning back.
Yeah, that's what's scary, you know?
Was there a moment for you where you felt like, this is it? Like, do you remember that moment where I was like, I'm going to be a monk?
No, it was more like, I never had the thought I'm going to be a monk. I had the thought more like, I'm not the same anymore. And it was, I made a ritual of burning all my letters. Love letters and things letters. Just things that you find precious, that you want to be in your coffin. I made a ritual. I had a box, a tin can in the back, and I was burning, and I was cutting all my credit cards, my membership cards, and all these letters and all these pictures. You know, things that you think is like who you are. And I remember like pictures, and I look at each one of them, and I made it go into my mind. I can still tell you. I remember I had this statue in wood of a Buddha, looking at it and then burning it. So I burned like all the things. I had this box that was like all this precious stuff, but yeah, I got like that part of that me is, you know, gone. It dies. And there's no turning back. It's scary. I remember, it was quite emotional, because each thing I took out, I was like, you know, and it, you know, it's burnt, dude. It's melt. And the credit cards and the things, you know, like, it's so funny. And it's particularly the ATM card. I like to refer to that, because I would go to the ATM like 2 or 3 times a week sometime. And it's just so, God, I don't know. I was just so happy that I don't have to go to the ATM anymore. You know? It's like, I remember many times just like thinking about it, like, oh my God. You know? It's kind of like in the sutra, that guy is like, oh, my happiness. Mine is like, because, you know, you have to find the ATM, you have to wait, and you know, you have to do it, and then you have to spend money. Anyway, there's, that moment right there, was like, it wasn't like who I'm going to be, but it's more like I am not that person anymore. That was, for me, you know, the scary part. Yeah. You know, There's no turning back. Yeah, I don't even know it's turning back. It's just, you know, it's not like a direction. It's more like identity. You no longer identify.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. It's like, what's that thing as a checkbox? I do not declare. Yeah. It's great to be free from trying to prove to other people who you are. It's so liberating. So I vow secretly inside, I will never be in another system. It's kind of weird because a monk is in a system, but our system is that.
Right.
That, you know, that's why we shave our head, and that's why we're brown. It's neutrality. For me, that's what it represents. But it's still a system. But it is a system that is, you have to protect that. So you don't actually become the form of that only. But the substance is, don't declare anything and don't have an identity, don't identify with it. It's weird, huh? But anyway, that's like nourished me up to now. And I have a backpack that I've had since college, and that reminds me that I have this green backpack, and it reminds me to be careful. Anyway, that's my these moments. Actually, I've never shared before, but yeah, just being with you and you knowing your path too. That's it's coming out.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone who is kind of thinking about monastic life and is like coming up against this difficult time, this scary time that's really challenging, trying to figure out and feels maybe like you were saying, like this kind of sense of like skepticism, and then also coupled with this feeling of like, but I love this and I'm healing. And this question of could I really let all of this go?
Yeah. For me, I would say to a person, because, you don't want to run after something else again. And that could be monastic life. For me, my personal thing was I'm no longer that person, and I don't need to behave like that anymore, trying to prove to other people who I am. So to be free from that is liberating. So to become a monastic is to declare that you don't want to have that convention anymore. So for me, that's more important than actually trying to be a monk, a Buddhist, and so on. And most of the healing comes from is when you can shed away all your stories about yourself. So that's it's very related. It's nothing different from healing and insights and so on. It's just another way of looking at it. It's more like, rather than looking for something new to identify with, be aware that you're shedding things that you have hold on to. So it's the same thing. It's just an inverse of it. You understand what I mean? Yeah. So for me, I'm always cautious not to. I mean, we gotta identify with things. You have to live in the convention and the conformity of things, but be careful. That's all. So as a young person, there's a lot of messages. So the practice should help you be free and be aware and be cautious, because there's so many tricks that we do to ourselves, and so as you learn about monastic life and what it means to be a monk more deeply, it's about being free. So to keep that in mind. So whether you become a monk or not, I think the journey is about being really who you are. And that's it's not something you would discover, but who you are comes when you start to shed your stories. That's another way of looking at it. So trying to look at who you are, what you identify, what you like, you get really confused. But if you begin to see how stories that you told about yourself, or what you've heard people tell about yourself, or what society, your parents, and so on, the more you recognize how that has affected you and so on, the more free you become from it. You can still do whatever you need to do, but you're not only that. That is like, wow. The choice, you see? Now you get to choose, and it's deliberate. That is a monk. I choose to be in this intimate way with the community, with this path. I choose not to be in a romantic relationship, but I choose to have real relationship with my people I come across with. So anyway, it's like always a constant choice. But yeah.
Well, I find myself also wanting to ask, you've been a monk now over 2 decades, and my perception is that you love it. You really just, that's something, I've known you for the last 4 years, and I just feel like that love for this way of life is so contagious. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, like, what has sustained that love over the course of, 2 decades plus.
Yeah, I was very lucky from the early days of teachers that taught me and transmitted to me to learn and to constantly discover. So for me, the monastic life is the perfect setting for me to do that. To constantly be a student, and to always discover, and to actually carve my own day and carve my own life and do what I like. And it's not like grand, it's just like, it's my choice, and it's up to me, how I want to spend it. And I choose to be part of this community, to meet that brother, to do, So for me, it's like this way of living is most conducive to discovery and novelty. We live seasonally, like we went through a whole period of events like summer, like blooming, and it's hot and it's going, and then now we're in winter, and then there's spring. So the monastic life is quite natural. It works with nature and the seasons. I think a lot of urban life, and and it's a privilege, So I'm aware that I'm grateful, and I know that it's also a life of service. So the more I benefit from it, the more I see that it needs to be circular. I need to give back. So I need to serve, and I need to make this available for other people. So that brings me meaning, and why. So I'm not just like hiding and just living in my peace, But I see that, I'm just so grateful for it that I need to like share it with other people and let them touch it as well. So it's quite, the system is quite, what do you call it? It's very, it operates very well. So the more you benefit yourself and you know how to enjoy, the more that helps other people. And then when they bloom and they transform, they help you because you experience their joy. So it's like it's an amazing system that we have. I mean, that's what, and like through my whole years, all the years of monastic, it's so rich, man. My 20 years, I think, is a many lifetime of normal people. What I've been exposed to, and that's because of our teacher. So I'm very grateful to that. And I think the more I grow older in the community, that I realize how much love and compassion our teacher had for not just us monastic, but like all kinds of people. So I just feel a little bit in debt, and that I gotta do what he did and continue what he did, which is to make community and create, spaces and opportunity for other people. Thay loved it when people take the 5 months training. He comes back and he's like overjoyed. 5 months training. People, take it, and he's like, wow. And he always asks us how many people take it, It's always on his mind how many people have stepped on the path and seen this and changed their way of behavior. So for me, just thinking like that, it's like, wow. Yeah. I have down days, and, living in community, we take breaks, and we also have down days and not feeling well, and, there's a season where you're more reclusive. But because I live in community, I don't always have to be in the front. I get to take a break, and and my brothers understand me. So I just feel, it's a good spot. It's a good way, again, of being in the world. Just another, Yeah, and I'm happy a lot of, young people coming, and, you guys are amazing, group of monks that, it's inspiring, So I want to live in such a way that's also inspiring for young people. And that's, not like going out to save the world, but it's just like, do what I like to do and be happy at it. Because that's what people want to do, right? It's like, and have meaning for it. And it's benefiting myself and other people. I was like, what profession? Man, this is like the best profession there is, because it's all the essence of why anybody would do anything meaningful without getting paid, without trying to prove to the boss, without needing recognition, raise. You just do what you love, and, once in a while people, recognize it's great, but you still do it anyways.
Yeah.
So for me, is like I went and bought a tree with the brother this afternoon, because to commemorate the abbot of Deer Park, and I know many lay friends would love to do that, and it's just whole happiness going around, look at which tree will come up here and be part of our community, and going down the nursery and say, oh man, and inviting the tree to come back, and practice with us, because he or she will become quite a nourishing memory for a lot of people. So anyway, that's like, wow, it's like a joy to go buy a tree, because I live in this community, you have this opportunity to bring happiness as well as experience happiness. Or, you just go buy a tree and get it and put it in the ground, But because I'm in a spiritual community, I'm aware of other things. That it will affect some people. Planning, because they had a relationship with the abbot. And they know he likes pine trees. He planted all this pine tree around the volleyball court. Every single one he pointed, and I would like mark it. And we went out and bought it with his medicine money. That he would get a check every month, and he'd say, hey, young brother, let's go get some trees. So anyway, that's like, I'm happy just doing that, right? Which could be a just banal thing to do, right? But I had Phap Dung with me, and we had so much fun.
Last question is, you're heading to the COP26 conference soon, and it seems like over the course of your monastic life, just my perception is it seems like you're speaking more about engaged Buddhism, and in particular the climate crisis. And I wonder how that influences your practice, how the climate crisis and what goes on in the world influences your practice, and the importance of engaged Buddhism to you.
Yeah, some monks and nuns, they, know Thay because, through books and practice, and Thay treats each of his student differently, and depending on how they came in. And I came in and he gave me a lot of engaging stuff with society and stuff, and I would go with him to the White House, to the Congress retreat, and just many places. I was very lucky to be there. And so I saw like Thay is not just like, reclusive peace and poetry and just like, but he wants to come across heads of states, CEO, politicians, and people, activists, all kinds of realms of society. And for me, that's very inspiring. So anytime I have an opportunity, like the brother and sister are kind of like, they're limited over there in France, so they call over and they ask me if I can support. I was very happy to do that. And I go as a prayer. So everywhere we go is a kind of bringing our energy and contributing and supporting whoever is there, because it's quite radicalized right now in terms of the issue, and it's quite it's really hard for people to move forward without being combative, and accusative and so on. But we're all in it, so even if we're on the right and we're the victim, but the way we talk to the CEO of Shell, talk to, it's like, God, there's a way we can inspire them. They are being inspired. They're coming for that, So this is something for me, a challenge for our generation and for the way forward is actually, rather than just like, let's get to like real practical how to solve this together, man. It's like, okay, we know these oil companies are really bad, but they have families, they have children, let's figure out how to like work with them. So there's like a lot of interesting people coming to this thing. In fact, the brother and sister that was at the TED conference right before that, it was also just a week ago. And they, I was just, Christiana Figueres is there. She's so inspiring, Joe Campino with The Guardian before. And they're really, trying to get our message of practice, of feeling love for Mother Earth, feeling compassion for both sides, so that we can have a dialogue and like, let's try to solve this, with the numbers, with the science, with the policies and so on. But like, it's a challenge not to be accusative and like really, pointing the finger and then they end up leaving, Anyway, that's, for me, that's one aspect. We bring the practical, deep listening, using loving speech. So anywhere that's an opportunity for me to try to help people to like have a dialogue and try to understand each other's suffering, whether they're like of a company or whether they're being perpetrated on. Especially all the people of color, as well as the nations, the southern nations, are really, they don't have any choice. This is happening to them. But there's some of us in more affluent parts of the world. We still have choices. We're kind of privileged. So I think there's also that kind of, I love that voice is more and more being heard. So this is kind of like what's happening at this conference, that the people who, most nations, we know where, the last 100 years this stuff came from. That I think to inspire them, to let them know that it's like, come on, it's for real, and take up responsibility and so on. But to do it in a way that inspires them to do it rather than get them to not work with us. So I think that's a practical aspect of it. And the other is just also our presence of actually, being there and it would be just me and another brother, but wherever we go, we'll definitely try to keep the peace and the prayer for Mother Earth. I was at the COP21 and we walked around like that. We ate lunch like that. And so it just brings the monastery, even though it's 2 people walking around. But so our presence, and Phap Dung just shared with me, we had a conference call this morning, and it did impact a lot of people in that way. So they came, and so we made contact. They met Alcor.
This is at the TED?
Yeah, that other event.
Yeah.
And now Gore actually shared with Phap Dung, and he was surprised. He said, I love Thay's books, and he's inspired me a lot. And it's like, everybody's like, really? So, it just tells you, it's like, you never know, who's like being influenced or not by the spiritual dimension. So I think having us there, we're not politicians, we're not, activists, we're not scientists. So what is our role? Why are we there, So that question is a mantra. And so as a part of the human family, there's many ways to be in the world and many ways to try to look at how to help and find solutions. So just, I can see myself walking there and enjoying and being at peace and really recognizing whoever comes across my path, and seeing who they are. And, everyone has got a family, everybody's got children, everybody's got a partner, to acknowledge that, and everyone suffers. So we can touch that deeply in people. And everyone wants that kind of harmony and peace as well. That's like basic, and I've seen Thay do that formula. It's like, don't talk about the politics, don't talk about like how they can speak more lovingly to their wives. This is the head of, World Bank, and then elevator is like, Thay, he said to Thay, that really worked. Flower watering, thank you. I'll never forget it. It's like they didn't talk about saving the world with how to help the world. There's like head of a World Bank thanking Thay for teaching him how to water flowers. I was like standing in there like, oh man, that's cool. Has nothing to do with anything, but it's everything important to him. So I just remember these moments of how Thay, it's not like an activist, but he's there to help people touch their humanity and their, everybody has to go home and eat something with their family. And so that everybody's got suffering that they haven't processed or figure out how to work with in their intimate life. And if that is like the root of a lot of suffering. Of course, the climate and the human devastation and the crisis that we're in is there too. But if you look deeply, it's actually from a crisis of the intimate aspect of being human. It's the crisis of that. The consumption, the running, the overdevelopment, the inequality, the attack, the violence, the discrimination. So if you sit and meditate on that, you can see you can have tears for that as a human family. So the COP conference is like, for me, it's like the human family coming together, and hopefully we can touch each other's suffering and hear it deeply so that it can bring compassion for both sides, or however many sides there are, all parties involved. So it's a kind of prayer for that. So participating is not, we're not going as like the other people, Yeah, so I have to, before I go, the time leading up to it, I spend time to meditate on that and to reflect on all like Thay has done in this realm, appreciating and just reviewing the spirit of that.
Thanks so much for listening. Each week we'll release another interview, so please subscribe. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please help us spread the word. Today's episode is produced and edited by Kenley Neufeld. Music is generously offered to us by Benjamin Portson and Alex Klein. Our special thanks to Brother Phap Dung for sitting with me and sharing his story. Meet the Monastics is recorded at Deer Park Monastery, a mindfulness practice center in the Plum Village tradition of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh in Escondido, California, on the traditional and unceded lands of the Kumeyaay Nation, to whom we extend our gratitude and respect. Deer Park offers mindfulness retreats and public days of mindfulness throughout the year, and a 5-year monastic training program for 18 to 35-year-olds. If you're interested in visiting, check out our website, deerparkmonastery.org, or follow us on social media. I'm Brother Min An. See you next week.